Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmadu wa nasalli ala Rasuli Kareem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask him send peace and blessing on our Prophet Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, we're in the month of Zul-Hijjah and we are currently in lockdown. As everybody knows today, especially for Melbourne, our lockdown has been extended. In other states in Australia, there's lockdowns been in place as well. But in our one, we had a snap lockdown and now that's been extended for another we don't know how long it's going to be. So this is like our fourth or fifth lockdown. So it's getting to summer, especially. We are definitely going to be missing out on Eid. Whether you follow, local siding or international siding, regardless, either way, we're going to be having Eid at home, just with our own families. So we're going to lose that whole community, and even the weekend after. So by the time we actually get back, most likely, by the time we get back to being together in the masjid again and the community again, it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while, and therefore that we have to go through, and sometimes we're not able to bear it. The test is from Allah. We accept it cheerfully, but we ourselves are weak, and we ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for everybody in the ummah for afiyah. And even though we say Eid Mubarak, but it's Eid, the nights of Eid that are coming, these are special days and nights, and definitely the ibadah and connection we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our emotions with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our fear of Allah, our obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of these are still in place, regardless of the external situation. These are external situation, and they do affect the world inside, in our heart, in our mind, but we have to be resilient, and we have to look at the people that are in worse situation than us because of COVID. Look in Indonesia now, if you look at the news, it's going out of control, and we're very far from that severity. Therefore, although we are very weak people and so forth, but we also have to be grateful for where we are at them. And alhamdulillah, we had Ramadan, we had Eid after Ramadan. I know this is a separate Eid, but last year we didn't have either, right? If you remember. So therefore it's better than last year, that's for sure. And we're a little bit more used to it, but we can get fatigue. Anyway, we'll continue reading the book, and the second half of the chapter, which is related to aspects of the grave, rewards and punishment that Allah opens on certain people to see in this world. So sometimes they're pious people, sometimes mashayikh, sometimes ulama, sometimes average people, sometimes even sinful people, and that becomes a means of their tawbah. So it's not a sign that somebody's pious that sees that, but Allah, out of His wisdom, great wisdom, He opens up on certain people that realm, and they see it, and then they report to humanity what they saw, what they experienced, and so forth. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our grave a garden from the gardens of paradise, not a pit from the pits of hell. The first narration or incident is about that a person, one of the Aban bin Abdullah al-Bajali, he said a neighbor died, and we washed him and put kaf on him, the sheets, shrouds for burial. We carried him to the graveyard, and we went to his grave. There was like an animal, like a four-legged animal, like a cat, and we tried to shoo off that animal and so forth through things I did and whatever, but he wouldn't go. Then we changed the grave, and then he was also in that. He found that it was in the grave, and we kept on doing this, and so we had to bury him like that. And when we buried him, and that thing wouldn't move, and when we placed the last brick, last part of the grave, we covered it up, and we heard a great sound. So this person is being punished in the grave. We know this is not good, what's happened to him. And then we went to his wife and asked him, what did you do? Like, can you tell us anything about him? He said that because they told her what happened. She said that he never used to make ghusl. He never make ghusl after janaba, after having intercourse. And as fard, the ghusl is fard, he will not bathe himself and clean himself properly. In other narrations mention, one of the Abdullah bin Muhammad al-Madini says that I had a friend, and the friend said to me that one day I went, and somehow it turns out on a journey that I ended up next to a graveyard, and I prayed Ma'asr Salat at the side next to the grave, near the grave, because that's maybe the track was there, and when I was there, I heard a sound coming out from like someone's moaning, and the person, you can hear, like it's like ouch, or like the sound of pain. Someone's in pain. I used to fast. I used to pray, and but that, and I kept on. This kept happened to me, and I said, sunset. I prayed Maghrib, and then I heard from the grave again, like the sound of pain. I used to pray, I used to fast, and I went back to, because this incident shocked me so much that when I went back to my family, he said that I had a fever and I was sick for 2 months from this experience. One of the Imams mentions, Abu Qasim al-Lalikai, in his Kitab Sharh al-Sunnah, that he heard from Yahya bin Ma'in, Rahimahullah, that there was a grave digger, and I asked him, what's the strangest things that you've seen? And he said that the most strange is like sick person, moaning or groaning or whining, like the way the sound, when someone is very sick and they complain. So he said that sound I heard coming out of the grave. It's mentioned about Al-Haris al-Muhasibi, rahimahullah, and he was in Basra, and he goes, I heard from a voice coming from the grave, Awwah min adhab Allah. He's like similar sort of thing, like a complaint, like complaining about, I'm in pain from the azab of Allah, from the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, Al-Haris al-Muhasibi, rahimahullah, he explained that he was at a grave, and I heard the same thing, Awwah, the sound coming from the grave. It's probably the same as the previous narration. That the sound was another chain from the previous narration, that he said that I heard this Awwah, that a sound, was persons complaining about how they're shouting and they complaining about, or groaning or moaning in that sound, or how painful it is. It's mentioned about Sadaqa bin Khalid al-Dimishqi, that he heard from some of the seniors of Damascus, the elders and mashayikh, and the elders of mashayikh of Damascus, that one of our friends died on the way while we're doing Hajj, and we came to some people because we need to dig the grave, and we asked for an axe and whatever, the pick and whatever they needed to dig the grave, and they lent it to us, and then we dug. What happened was that someone left the axe or the pick inside the grave, so then we had to go dig the grave again to take it out. As we were doing that, we saw that person who had died, his hands and his feet and his neck were all tied together in the ring of the axe. All right, so where the axe goes into the wood, right, it's the way that the ring goes. His head, his limbs, his legs and arms and legs, and his neck were all gathered in that ring as a punishment. As soon as we saw that, he goes, we covered it, left it there. We went to the people we got the axe from. We paid them. We compensated them for their, we're not going to retrieve that, obviously. And then he said that we went to his, to find out what this person did. And then we went to his wife and we asked her. He said that he befriended somebody who had money. Then he murdered that person, obviously for the money, and took his wealth. And then he was doing Hajj. He was doing Hajj and going to participating in expeditions because of with that money that he's stolen from somebody else. Ibn Abi Dunya, with his chain of narration, has narrated. I'll leave that one because there's a few variations of that one. Basically, the summary of those narrations is related to Umar ibn Aziz talking about Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, and he said that when the graves were open, when your father and Walid, previous Khalifas of the Banu Umayyah, that we saw that their necks were turned away from the Qibla. There's another narration mentioned similar sort of thing, not specific about those people, but Ibn Abi Dunya and Fadl ibn Yunus and others have narrated these various different narrations about some of the from Umar ibn Aziz, who was also a Banu Umayyah ruler himself, known as the second Umar, and for his justice and so forth. And he narrated about the previous, from his own family, previous kings, and because of certain things that they've done, that how they were, because I saw or others saw what was happening to them in the grave. Also he mentions that Ibn Abi Dunya has narrated that Abdul Mu'min bin Abdullah al-Mawsili, he narrated that one of the person narrated to him that a wind came, like a sandstorm came, and it blew the sand or dirt off the graves. And we saw that many people that were buried in the graves, their faces had been turned away from the Qibla. And in a similar sort of narration, he said that when we were fixing the grave, and one man was burying his daughter, and then as we were fixing it, then he said, actually, he said that I saw my daughter, I buried her, but as I was doing it, I could see that the last sort of brick I was putting, but I could see through it that her face got changed towards the other way, like away from the Qibla. I saw her in my dream, because this grieved me a lot, and I saw her in my dream, and he said generally most people are turned away from the Qibla. And he said, and she, as though she intended to say to me that most of those people are the ones who die in a state they're committing major sins. He said that Ishaq Fazari, he narrated about a Nabash. Nabash were people who used to steal the coffins, or they were grave diggers. They try to get whatever they can. So even they'll steal coffins or the cloth that dead people are buried in. And I mean, of course, we take cloth and material for granted these days, but in the past, these were things that were valuable. So he said that he used to go in the graves, and he made tawbah, and he said that because he used to dig up dead bodies from the grave to steal the coffin and whatever. He said that majority of the people, that their faces had turned away from the Qibla. So this was sent to Imam al-Awza'i. Imam Awza'i from Tabi'in, Tabi'in, he was one of the most biggest Imams of his generation, the greatest Imam to be in Sham. I believe his grave is in Beirut in Lebanon today. He wrote to me, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, 3 times. He said the one who has face turned away from the Qibla, that he's died other than on the Sunnah, meaning on the way of the Prophet ﷺ and the way of Deen. It mentions that Abdul Mu'min bin Abdullah al-Ansi, like, why did he make tawbah? It was a former grave digger. Sorry, not grave digger, it was a grave robber. So he said that he made tawbah. He goes, what is a strange? He made tawbah, he gave up that life of sin. He said, what's the stranger things that you've seen? He said, I saw a person that there were nails in his body, in his whole body, and a big one that was in his head, and another one was in his feet. It's mentioned in another narration to Nabash, a grave robber, because majority, he said, what's the reason for your tawbah? He says, majority of the people whose grave that I dug, their faces were turned away from the Qibla. As you know, that when we bury our dead, we face them towards the Qibla. Ibn Rajab says, our Sheikh Abu Abdullah ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, the chief student of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, was a teacher of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali rahimahullah. So he says that in his Kitab al-Ruh, our Sheikh has said, and he mentions about a man who came to the marketplace, and he was selling nails with 2 heads, right? Selling nails with 2 heads in the market of the blacksmiths, where the blacksmiths used to make their things and their wares and so forth. And this will not melt, and because it doesn't soften, then we can't, as a blacksmith, as we're hammering it and hitting with a hammer, it wouldn't change, right? It wouldn't. You couldn't mold it into anything. So I found this. He goes, where did you find these nails from? And he told him that he said that I found an open grave, and there were bones there, and these nails were in the bones. And I told him to take me to it, and we went there. So he said that. So he said that I couldn't take the bones out, the nails out. So then what I did was I broke the bones with stones, and I gathered all these nails. And he said they were very small nails, but they had 2 heads on it. And he said, Ibn Rajab said that I heard this when I was a child. حكاية هذه الحكاية مشهورة ببغداد. This was a very well-known incident that occurred in my childhood in Baghdad. When I was a child, I heard this. And he said, our Sheikh also, furthermore, he mentions another incident like this, where Abu Abdullah Muhammadin Wazir al-Harani, he went from after Asr in Ahmed to his garden, to a garden before sunset, and when he had to go through a cemetery, and as he was going through it, there was like a fire, like the vat, I think that's what it's called, of the blacksmith, the place where he burns a fire. And I saw the dead person in the middle of it, and I guess I started rubbing my eyes because I might be still asleep. This must be a dream, to check whether I'm awake or not. And when I saw it, I turned and I saw the city walls. Because I'm not asleep, and I went to my family and I was like about to faint. They came with food and I couldn't eat, and then I tried to check. I asked about that person, that grave specifically. He said he was a tax collector or toll. It could be done illegally, like like you sort of threaten people on the way and take money from them, or he was actually a real tax collector, but he might have taken bribes or not done his job properly or be oppressive to people. And so these are some incidents. That's the end of the chapter. These are some incidents from our history, and it's some incidents about the reality of the grave. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opening up certain things for certain people, some mashayikh, some people. It becomes a means of tawbah for certain people. It's not like you have to accept it in the sense of that it's a hadith per se, but it's a window that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows. It's not absolute, but it's a window that Allah allows to the reality of the grave, so that He can bring it closer to us. So it is a reminder for us, and it may be a means of hidayah for us as well. Therefore, the qabr is real, barzakh is real, the reward and punishment, the bounties and the rewards, as we went through last week as well, is real. Azab al-qabr is real, it's coming. And so the only way to protect ourselves, if you see in these things mentioned, people, major sins are mentioned repeatedly, especially major sins we have to make tawbah from. Any major sins, there's no need to not make tawbah. We ask Allah to give us tawfiq to make a tawbah to nasuha, like just a tawbah that all the falsehood and batil comes out of our heart. Our attachments to all haram comes out of our heart. Like really sincerely from the heart, we ask Allah forgiveness for all our past wrongs. That's something that is a given, that as a Muslim we have to do all the time, make istighfar and tawbah. And also make dua for ourselves and dua for the ummah as well. Allah forgive the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah forgive them and make istighfar for all mu'mineen and mu'minat. As much as you make dua for others, make istighfar for others, that same dua is made for you by the malaika. And in that number of people that you make dua for, that istighfar is, or ask forgiveness for, that dua is also coming. That dua is also coming to you in that number or that multitude of people. So why would we deprive ourselves? The qabr is serious, right? All the laughing and jokes and everything and all the things of this dunya, there's nothing to get us out of that except for doing good and staying away from evil. There's nothing else we can do except do a'mal, do the good things that are pleasing to Allah, correct our intentions, do a'mal salihah, speak that which is good and truth, and not engage in ghiba and haram. These are major sins, right? Hasad, jealousy, sickness of the sins of the heart, sins of the tongue, sins of the limbs. We make tawbah from that and try to do what is good. Try to do what is good, what is pleasing to Allah, speak that which is good, and think and clean the heart, make effort on the heart, which is where everything starts and ends. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and tawbah is not something that is once off. I think it was Ibn Rajab said, in the journey to Allah, in trying to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is the beginning, the middle and the end. There's no such thing as like we've now made tawbah and it's over and done with. Tawbah, it's like part and parcel, it's a constant process. And the only thing that matters in tawbah is our actions, a'mal or sin. There's nothing else. If I'm a part of this group or this association or this board or this jamaat or this whatever it is, that won't save me. My a'mal is what will save me. My sins, making tawbah from, will save me. Therefore we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save us from the azab al-qabr and give us tawfiq to do a proper tawbah, that all the batil and falsehood comes out of our heart. And the heart, we die with a state of heart that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We die with actions and speech that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our graves a garden from the gardens of paradise, not a pit from the pits of hell. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. And in advance to everybody, Eid Mubarak. Despite the circumstances, also spend the nights of Eid in ibadah. This is something the lockdown can't take away from you. It can take other things away from you, but you seeking in home on the nights of Eid should not be wasted. Shopping centres are closed, masjids are closed, but your hearts are still there, your tongue to make dua, your limbs are still there to make ibadah. So of course, we should avail of these opportunities. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.